Today on episode 486 of the I Am Salt Lake podcast, we get a chat with our new friend, Bryant Heath. I don't know if you guys caught the article in the Salt Lake Tribune. This was a few months back about the guy that ran every street in Salt Lake City during the ever famous year of 2020. Well, that guy is Bryant, the guy we have on the podcast. I had to bring him on here and find out from him what it was like. I wanted to find out, hey, did you really even meet your goal, right? Like, did you reach it? Did you get there? How was it? We find out everything in this conversation. Bryant shares with us all the ups and the downs of the run.
All of his experience.
But we're going to get into that here in just a minute.
But before we do, we're going to introduce ourselves. I am Chrissy Hollifield.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name's Chris Hollifield.
And I am his gal pal. And if you're a longtime listener of this podcast, you know it. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us again. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, you might be asking yourself what it's all about. We are here every week with a brand new episode where we get to showcase awesome people in Salt Lake City, Utah, and surrounding areas. We get to talk to business owners, authors, tattoo artists, restaurant owners, really anyone that might have a cool story to share.
Hey, we got a brand new sponsor for this episode, for the podcast. I am excited to talk about him.
Me too.
One thing, keep in mind, you guys, whenever we talk about any of our sponsors, when you go out of your way to support our sponsors, you're directly supporting the podcast. Hey, do you miss going to movies? Well, you're in luck because this summer, the nonprofit Sundance Institute is kicking off a free screening series for the locals to say thank you to its home state. The outdoor program will spotlight buzzy feature films and shorts from 2021 Sundance Film Festival program. And guess what? Admission is free. To see the film lineup and to save your spot at these special outdoor and drive-in events going on in Park City and Salt Lake County, visit sundance.org, and we'll see you soon, Utahns. And many thanks to Sundance Institute for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Let's get into that conversation that we had with Bryant Heath. Like I said, he ran every street in Salt Lake City in the year 2020. This was a fascinating conversation. Such a cool guy. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the conversation. I want to jump right into the reason we brought you on the podcast, Bryant. I want to find out. So I read this article, I think it was in the Tribune, that you ran every street in Salt Lake City in the year 2020, the ever famous year of 2020 that the world stopped. You decided to run every street in Salt Lake City. Why? What happened?
You are one of those people who took advantage of the fact that everything shut down and did something awesome with it. That's the
Well,
coolest.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that for sure. And it's kind of ironic because I started the project, pre-pandemic. And so this was just going to be, my 2020 resolution, maybe hit the pavement a little bit, log a few miles, see the city a lot more intensely. And then obviously March rolls around, everything gets shut down. It's a dramatic change, both in my life and everyone else's life. But it was an opportunity, to say the least. I was able to go around town. I was home a lot more frequently. That set me up a lot better with, mapping my runs and actually doing the running.
So you had no idea. So you started this in January. You had no idea that the whole pandemic was going to happen.
The whole world was going to go.
That is amazing. See, for some reason, I thought you did this because of the pandemic, because you were at home. I mean, because, obviously everything started so at the beginning of 2020, almost right. In March.
Well, really. I thought it was a joke in the beginning. I'm like, okay, haha, we're talking about coronavirus. Okay, it's real.
Yeah, you're watching the news articles online. Everything's happening in China, maybe Italy. You just never expect it to hit home.
Right. It's like, it's over there.
This is awesome. This story even gets a little bit better here, man, because obviously the gym shut down, so I had to hit the streets myself and start running and walking and start getting out in nature and start getting out and about because everything was shut down. So
the horror.
What was the motivation? Like, what made you decide to do every street in Salt Lake City? Was there a motivation behind that?
Right. So it was probably the December prior. I think I was looking up where to eat or a restaurant or someplace. I don't really remember the exact reasons, but I was on Google Maps. and I start looking at the maps and I start like just randomly zooming in on areas like Liberty Wells or Rose Park and, streets that I've never been on. And then holistically, you start looking, oh, wow, like I haven't been to probably 3/4 of the entire city. And I've lived here for over a decade now. And it just was pretty shocking, pretty sobering to say the least that, you kind of fall into your routines of, going to work, coming home, going to, your 5 restaurants that you always like to go to, going to the 5 parks you always like going to. And so naturally, you just kind of stay in this status quo. And so I thought, hey, this would be a great opportunity to kind of mesh my running habit that I like to do, as well as kind of explore the city a lot more.
Explain how far north and west, south, east, because Salt Lake City, I mean, how... What did you define? So I'm curious here. I'm curious.
Right. So on the, actually on the city's website, they had a map that has the boundaries, and it was a little surprising to see, how westward it goes. It goes 7,200 west, even further past that off of North Temple. So it goes incredibly far west. Like, you always hear about like some of these sites out west, like where the new prison is getting developed or where these Amazon distribution facilities are, to me, it was just in the middle of nowhere. It's just a news story I'd read. And then now, like, you actually go and observe and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm way out in the boonies where downtown is just like, you can't even see it almost. You can see the mountains, obviously, but it goes way far west. On the north and the east side, really it's City Creek Trail, that if you take that trail all starting at Memory Grove Park and just kind of head on up for about 10 or so miles, you wind up to the north and eastmost point of the city. And then there's also northern ports, more north of the airport. That was, again, surprising. Farmland is around there. I never suspected that there was farmland in Salt Lake City proper. And then down south, you actually have the Brickyard area, which is a very interesting kind of like a peninsula that's basically surrounded by Mill Creek all around. But for some tax reasons, I think Salt Lake City decided to annex that portion in that mall area, where Harmon's is and things like that by Brickyard to get the tax revenue. So yeah, it's very interesting boundaries for sure. And I learned, so much about maps in the city and through this project.
So cool.
Did you discover like any roads that haven't been developed yet that you're like supposed to be running on? You're like, wait a minute, this says it's a road right here, but it's just
that's a good, how accurate are current day maps?
Yeah, you definitely fall into the rabbit hole of just like perusing the city's map, perusing Google's map, perusing like all these open source maps that are around. And usually whenever I'd plan out my routes, I would use 3 maps. And if like 2 of the 3 agree that it's a road, then I would run it. But if it just shows you how like you think roads and streets are like this like very fixed concept, fixed
like a
idea.
Definite thing.
Exactly. Like they have signage. I know where I am. But after doing the project, it's a lot more ambiguous and nebulous, to say the least.
You know, I was actually talking to my kid about this the other day. It's so interesting seeing how roads have been developed over time, because initially they were created for like horse and buggies. And so we've done like this weird transition and we kind of make them work for us right now, but they're like super inefficient and, like not really the best way to do things, like the way that we've laid them out. But we have to accept it because we already did it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see that like reminiscent, like around the Fair Park area where you have these exceptionally wide roads and there's just houses. It's like a residential road that's probably like, maybe like 50 yards wide. And it's going back to your point. It's just kind of like we've just lived with it because we've lived with it for so long.
Yeah.
What about like private property areas, stuff like that, like gated communities? I'm sure there were some areas you couldn't.
Hobbitville. Did you run through Hobbitville? I know it's not called that. Is that? Sorry, I just want to go there.
At the time, like I actually live in the Sugar House area, kind of near where now Allen Park.
Yeah, Allen Park. Yeah,
that's what's called. Okay. Yeah.
It was actually getting transitioning from, the former residences that were there to the park. And so it was under construction. I basically only had like 3 rules. One, I didn't run on interstates because it's illegal. So
that's
you can't, that's why you don't see them. Yeah,
also
exactly.
death. Yeah.
Exactly. 2, active construction zones. Like, there's probably a dozen or so, these like condos that are going up that's kind of appropriated some of these smaller roads that are next to it just so they can have like construction equipment. So I didn't run any of those. And then any like gated communities that had aggressive trespassing signs or
just aggressive ones.
Yeah, if there's like exactly. If it's just like not nonchalant, like there's a gate but I can kind of open it. Okay,
just like
then I'll go
throw a rug up there and scale the fence. You're fine.
Beware of dog. Okay, that means they're serious.
Yeah, but I would say for the most part, I mean, obviously interstates are pretty a lot of miles, but all the other ones maybe a few miles here or there that I actually missed. But I felt pretty good about completing the project.
Were there any areas though, man? Like, because I'll tell you, I've gone on some runs and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be running here. Like, this does not look like the best. I mean, even like with wild dogs or something. Like, it just seems like to me, if you don't know neighborhood, you don't know what's around there. And it's
That's true. And dogs is a good point. Yeah. Dogs always come out of nowhere and bite you.
Yeah. Always. I mean, it just seems like, did you run into anything like that?
So on the dog side of things, actually, I never had any negative interactions with dogs. Of course, I had like probably 2 or 3 that were, off leash on someone's front yard. And then they would just come up to me. I would just stop casually, let them stiff my arm, and just, their owner was really good about bringing them back in. But that was one of my irrational fears, I would say, because I just didn't know what to expect. Yeah.
Not irrational. I've heard war stories.
Yeah, maybe I was just very, very fortunate in my timing. I don't know. But all positive experiences there. As for, any sort of areas that I felt uncomfortable in, not too terribly many, to be quite honest. Like, again, you go in, I could probably count one hand how many times I've been on the west side. And you always hear kind of, that's the quote unquote bad side of town. It's just so overblown. And so going into it, again, I didn't know what to expect. And that was the nice thing about this project is kind of you get more familiarized with the area and you understand, hey, the west side's great. There's really no unsafe areas that I felt running around. There was a few spots where maybe it wasn't conducive to running, mostly because like in these heavily distribution centers or industrial areas, like there might not be a sidewalk, for instance, obviously, because they're not, expecting runners to go down California Avenue out by 5600 West or something like that. So, but for the most part, yeah, exactly. And so for the most part, I think I negotiated all that pretty well. So.
And I like that you point that out because not enough people talk about this. The West Side is very awesome and there are not scary places in Utah. Come on, guys.
Well,
I mean, I
didn't even mean it necessarily like scary with people, even as much as like. I just want to call this out because I love the West Side, and that's all I want to say. Yeah,
it's the coolest. It has the best food.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Sorry to cut in here, but we're going to take just a moment and tell you about one of our awesome sponsors. I love talking about them. UtahMarijuana.org. They are your #1 spot for all things medical marijuana. Medical cannabis, CBD, and THC. I don't know if you guys remember way back on episode 420, we had Tim Pickett on the podcast to find out about medical marijuana here in Utah, find out all about the medical cannabis program here in Utah. Well, now UtahMarijuana.org is a sponsor of this podcast, and their team of medical cannabis experts, they're going to make getting your medical card easy from your first office visit to navigating the state card application and beyond. They have over 20 compassionate and highly skilled, qualified medical providers that are ready to help you find relief so you won't have to search for a doctor willing to recommend cannabis treatment to you. Trust me, I know that one's pain. The patient experience team at UtahMarijuana.org is dedicated to helping you get all the way through the process so you can get your medicine legally. Check this out, because right now, they're offering an exclusive discount to listeners of this podcast. Use the code GREEN25. It's going to get you $25 off your first visit, right? It's going to save you some money. Plus, it's going to tell them you're coming from this podcast, which is going to directly support this podcast. So GREEN25 is the discount code. And depending on where you're located in the Valley, they have a location just for you. UtahMarijuana.org has locations from Bountiful to Provo. So depending on where you're located in the Valley, they're going to be able to help you out. So isn't it time that you took control of your own health? utahmarijuana.org. Feel better. How did you approach this? Because I don't think we've really talked about this aspect of the run yet. Because to me, especially if you start at the very beginning, back at the beginning of January, you were like, hey, I want to run every street in Salt Lake City. You must have had a game plan. You must have figured out how many miles you need to run every day. Like, how did you approach that? How did you make sure that November didn't roll around and you're like, oh, shoot, I still have half the city I got to run?
Time management seems like it would be a big
How many
thing.
miles? How did you run every day? How did you break that down?
Yeah, so going into the project, I kind of looked at the map and I kind of like roughly estimated is probably going to be around 1,200 miles, so about 100 miles a month, which if you really break it down, that's 25 miles a week. Huh. So if you run, 3 miles, 4 miles a day, every day, granted, then you could finish it out.
That sounds
the problem
terrible to me.
It doesn't. The problem is, basically Monday through Thursday, I was very tied down with with work and my commute and things like that. So I really only wound up running maybe 3 or 4 times a week. Basically Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then maybe one time in the evening.
So you ran long distances.
Right. And that was kind of a surprising aspect at the end of it, was seeing that I kind of averaged a little over 8-mile runs, which was kind of surprising to me. But you, like anything, like the more you kind of like starting out, no way I was anywhere near, running that long or that frequent. But like anything, with consistency and practice, you get better and better at it. You kind of get more and more comfortable. And by the end of the whole project, I felt really good with, 10, 12, 15-mile runs on a pretty regular basis. So, but yeah, going to your original question, I approximated it out and said it was probably a doable project for me. And then came the really challenging part, which was actually, logging it, mapping out the runs, and making sure that you got everything. And that was took a lot more time than I had originally expected. So
planning is amazingly difficult.
Well, probably with GPS on our phones or whatever you're using to log that way is really easy to make sure you're where you're hitting and making sure you're
right. So
hitting every street, I guess.
Yes. So I had a GPS watch. So every run I did, I definitely logged it. So that was the easier aspect. But basically kind of combining all those GPS files into like a usable map where you can kind of see everywhere you've been. It was very challenging to figure out how to do. And then not only that, but just like figuring out what's your next route. So I basically would plot every time where I've been. I would zoom in on a little area and then make a physical map and print out an area I haven't done. And then I would just by hand with a pen and paper, just routed out my route for the next run. So
I feel like you should be a data analyst. You would be so good at like tracking trends and all that. Oh my gosh, that is like a hard thing to do for real.
Yeah, maybe I'm just like obsessive or persistent. I don't know.
Hey, it works.
So what I want to talk about like discoveries, right? Like I'm sure there were things that while you were out running that you would run by and you'd be like, what the heck did I just run by? Or I can't believe this exists in Salt Lake. Like just discoveries that just blew you out of the water, so to say. I mean, I'm sure there was one or two or multiple things.
Every run you would say you'd see something. I took, I tried to log them as best I could, after each run, like in my phone, just like jot down rough locations and things like that. One thing that really stemmed from it is the amount of like outdoor murals you see. Going into it, I could tell you like, okay, there's some downtown or maybe there's some over in the Granary area, but maybe I would probably estimate there's about 50 or so murals. But after looking at my notes, I'm like, oh my goodness, there's probably, 150, 200 murals just in Salt Lake City. And so that was actually a project I did after I did all my running was I made like a Google map, for people to see all the outdoor murals and kind of where their cross streets are and their locations.
I think I have that link.
Oh, cool.
Didn't the Tribune do that? Or no, KUTV did that. There's a link there. I don't know if that's the best link, but I'll put that at IamSaltLake.com, with this episode so people can go there because it says 266 murals in Salt Lake City, which I'm a big fan of art and the murals. And I wish Salt Lake City had more art every time we go to another city, like
Everything
Philadelphia.
should be
It's just
painted.
like, oh my God. gosh, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
So I really want people to go check out,
Man, this map is really cool. Like these maps on here, I'm looking at them right now, and you have like broken out into different sections, like the Highland Park area run. And, that's really neat because people can, like, you've done all the work for people. This is so cool.
Yeah, it's a bit of an eerie feeling, if you live in Salt Lake. I ran by your house. If you work in Salt Lake, I ran by your house, and you kind of get, yeah, right. You get a little bit of an appreciation too of like scale. Like, you always hear like these stats like, 200,000 people live in Salt Lake, or there's X amount of businesses or restaurants that are in Salt Lake. And you don't really have an appreciation, I guess, until you do something like this where you physically go by each and every one of them, and you're just like in awe at all times.
It's kind of like we hear about the national deficit, but you don't really know until you go look at it.
They're all like abstract. Yeah, they're abstract concepts for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, it's that time of the podcast. We're going to take just a couple of minutes right now, tell you about one of our awesome sponsors. I love talking about the Salt Lake Barber Company because I've been going there. Gosh, it has been close to 6 years easily. I've been going to Isaac over there, cutting my hair, cutting my beard, making me look like $1 million. They are located at 10 East, 800 South, right on the corner of 8th and Main. They offer haircuts, beard trims, straight razor shaves, and they are truly a true community barbershop. They focus on providing the best work environment possible and allowing barbers there to always provide the highest quality experience while in the chair. Listen up, they do take walk-ins, but I would rather have a guaranteed appointment. So I go to saltlakebarberco.com, type in everything I want to, the services I want to get, the time I want to go in. I have a guaranteed appointment. Again, saltlakebarberco.com is their website. Go get yourself a haircut, a beard trim, straight razor shave. And many thanks to Salt Lake Barber Company for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. So what are you doing in 2021 then? Are you running every street in Provo this year, or what are you doing this year, man? Like what's the goals this year?
Yeah, I tried to go back to just like my regular runs, and I just got bored, to be honest. Like I go around Sugar House Park or go along, the Harvard Yale area or Sugar House area. And I just got bored because like I could like still remember like kind of passing by it the last time. And so I was like, well, let me just try out going through Mill Creek. And then I finished up running all the streets of Mill Creek in about April's time frame. And then I was like, well, let's try South Salt Lake now. And I'm about halfway done through South Salt Lake. So I don't know. I think I'll probably continue hitting all the different surrounding areas. Because again, every time you run, you see things. Like I was just yesterday over in this nondescript section of South Salt Lake, like near State Street, 2700 South to 3300 South. Like there's some strip malls, some residences. And just on that 8-mile run, I took 7 pictures of just like interesting things. There's a guy who has like this 6-foot-tall gnome statue in his front yard. And then there's two beautiful.
That is cool.
Yeah. It's off of 2700 South, just west of State Street. Yeah. And, there's 2 murals that are so beautiful just off the tracks line that, most people, if you don't take the tracks, you would never see. Or if you don't run these dead end streets that abut the tracks, train tracks, you would never see. And you're just constantly in awe. I mean, I try to document as much as I can. I do have like an Instagram account, mostly just for me personally, but some people just kind of like seeing all these unusual things that I tend to spot from all my running. So
what's the name of that if people want to follow you and see stuff?
Yeah, it's at SLCs, and it's kind of a pun because C's is spelled SEES.
Okay.
Like vision. So yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, I know.
So cute.
But yeah, I mean, you'd be shocked, and it's not just like obviously people have unusual things in their front yard. There's obviously a lot of outdoor artwork that's around, but even just like ironic street signs that you'd kind of notice, funny juxtapositions or license plates of people. It's just every run, I can't stress that enough. There's just always something unusual out there. I'm sure if you walked around your own neighborhood, you'd be in awe of what you could find if you kind of looked with open eyes, for sure.
Well, that's back to what I was saying at the beginning when the gyms closed down on me and when I had to go hit the streets, and I did start just walking around my neighborhood. I was like, I got this. I mean, I was telling
true.
Chrissy, I was like,
Yeah.
did you know there's a lady just around the corner from us that sells eggs? I mean, like we could just go buy
Or
fresh eggs from our neighbor.
Or like
we
he would
could
come
go
back
do
and be
this.
like, there's signs in everybody's windows. And they say like something
Yeah.
weird that
Yeah.
made no sense. And he's like, why does everybody, you know, it was fun
Yeah.
because we got to be like, what's happening in the neighborhood? You don't do that anymore. It's like, we're too mechanical nowadays.
No, I agree. And like, that was the sense from your neighborhood. And then, I have the same thing from my neighborhood. And every neighborhood, I can't stress this enough, whether you're in Glendale, whether you're on the East Bench, whether you're up in the avenues, like every neighborhood has just like, these kind of funny quirks, these kind of, distinctive landmarks that people, if you live in the neighborhood, yeah, you probably may or may not know about. But if you're, from outside, it doesn't even cross your periphery. And so coming across those, it's been fun. Like whenever I post about them on the Instagram, every now and then I'll, now it's getting more common, but like people will be like, oh yeah, that's my neighbor's house. Or, oh, one guy said I delivered flowers to this one particular house, and it kind of jogs. So I always have one or two connections to whatever I post, which is, kind of reminiscent of the idea of small lake city, everyone's
and
kind
I
of
love that because
integrated.
we all feel so disconnected, especially right now after the pandemic and all that crazy stuff. And it feels like what you're doing is helping us like pull back together as a community. You're really bringing the human back into technology.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
I mean, I appreciate those words for sure. And I hope I also spark a little bit of, urban exploration in some people. And, maybe instead of doing the same commute down 700 East that you've done a million times, maybe you go down 600 East. Maybe you drop it down, instead of going down 1700 South, go down 1800 South or one of those other kind of side streets. And I promise you that without fail, you'll find something interesting for sure.
You should put this together maybe like in a coffee table book or like some kind of book or even a blog, man. Like when you were talking about like your Instagram, back to when you were talking about like, oh, you're posting some of your pictures there and kind of like ways to continue this. Like I would love to come to your blog almost daily, see where you went on a run that day. Even I was like, oh, where did Brian go for a run today? I mean, I would find that fascinating.
You would definitely have to quit your job because that'd be a lot of work.
I mean, I have a few ideas. Like, ideally, I want to create like another Google map that's very similar to the mural map that kind of has like the locations or at least the cross streets of all my previous postings. So then holistically, people can kind of see, hey, I live in Liberty Wells. What is he featured, down in Liberty Wells? Additionally, I kind of wanted, since I'm kind of big into running, I would like to do like little like, maybe 5K routes through each one of the neighborhoods that maybe you hit, 4 or 5 or 6 of the sites that I've kind of featured. Again, that's just kind of like what you said. It can be a full-time job for sure. And this is mostly a hobby to me, but it seems like a hobby that a lot of people have resonated with. And so I'm thankful that they enjoy everything that I've kind of produced. So.
Would you consider Salt Lake City to be a running friendly city?
I would. I definitely would. I mean, it definitely does have its areas of improvement for sure, but sidewalks are very ubiquitous in all the residential streets. Like even if you go down to Mill Creek, I was shocked. Like I guess they don't believe in sidewalks or something. Maybe it's
driving there always freaks me out because I'm just like, it's just like
it's pretty bizarre.
And tiny road.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre for sure. And like pretty much all the residential streets down in Mill Creek don't have sidewalks. So in that regard, Salt Lake City is definitely better. My biggest complaint would be like people need to slow down in residential streets. Every neighborhood has, the little green men carrying the orange flag, or signs that say drive like your children live here, or slow down, like parents or residents just like pleading with drivers to just chill out and just go 20 miles an hour or 25 miles an hour. But, yeah, so that would be my one, hope is, maybe better enforcement in residential speed limits, maybe even dropping the, residential speed limit. I'm a big proponent of that. And, there's an organization called Sweet Streets, SLC that does a lot of kind of like, street design ideas. And one of their, initiatives is dropping the residential speed that I definitely sign up for sure.
Okay.
Ooh, they sound cool.
Yeah, I'll have to look into them.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, they have a lot of ideas. I mean, that's just one of their initiatives. They're just like strong proponents of having like, walkable streets, I mean.
Right. Yeah. Just safe for people. I know like our whole neighborhood has, where like our road gets used as a back road quite often. And everybody's like, how do we get people to stop? Just because we have so many kids outside all the time. It is hard.
And in residential streets, that's where you have the vehicle to bicycle or vehicle to pedestrian interactions. Like if you're on the interstate, okay, I get it.
If someone's on the interstate, that's their problem.
That's right. But, I on the residential streets, I think you should definitely prioritize pedestrians, bicyclists, because they're the unprotected folks. So even protections or regulations against vehicles that might be seemingly extraordinary, I think is worth it, to protect the unprotected individuals.
Do you have a favorite time of the year that you like running in Utah? Is it like, are you a favorite like fall or summer, spring, winter?
Oh, definitely winter. Winter has to be the best.
Hey, some people like running out in snowflakes, man.
I actually do like winter.
Do you really? I can't because I've fallen on ice so many times that I'm just like, I'm not going to go outside. I'm just going to stay here.
I like winter because the cold weather. I tend to breathe easier than springtime. I actually have asthma, so that's one of my motivators, from long ago to actually take up running, was to kind of build up lung capacity and kind of better manage my asthma.
Okay,
and,
that's impressive because I have asthma too. And my way of dealing with it is to just stay sitting. Don't move a lot because then you won't be able to breathe. Your way's a little bit healthier.
Thank you. And so springtime's always difficult for me because everything's in bloom and I just can feel it being challenging to breathe. And it's a shame because that's our prettiest time, I feel like, with everything in place. I would love to just run around the Capitol and see all the cherry blossoms and all that. But it's just a little bit more challenging for me.
Totally makes sense. As a man that suffers horrible with allergies, I get it, man. I get it. I get it bad. I get it really bad. Dude, that is so cool, man. I find this thing so fascinating, that the running every street of Salt Lake City, which will I want to shift into some standard Salt Lake City questions that we ask everybody that comes through here. Sure. Of when we have family and friends that come to town, we from the West Coast, East Coast, out of town, wherever. And they're like, hey, show us around, give us a tour of Salt Lake. I'm sure that your tours have improved. I'm sure you have a few new favorite spots that you like to take people to. What's the Bryant tour? Where do you take people to?
So probably a lot of unusual places. Atypical places would be what I'd say. I always tend to go up to the Natural History Museum. That's my favorite building in the whole city. I just love how it abuts the landscape, and it's just very, very beautiful. So I show them that. I take them down to that pyramid, the Suman Temple. Are you familiar with that one?
It's on the west, 700 west or something like that.
Yeah, near 700 west and 900 south-ish. Yeah.
It's wild.
It's pretty wild. I came across it, and that was one of those sites that you see for the first time, and you're taken aback because you're like, I never imagined there'd be a 2-story pyramid here.
Yeah, you're like, when did this get here, and how is no one talking about it?
That's right.
What's happening?
So I take them there. I also take them to they arrive in the airport, and then I take them back to the airport. There's an interesting road on the north side of the airport that kind of splits the two runways that's actually accessible, and you can go all the way up to basically knock on the door on the flight control tower. You can get it that kind of close up there, and it's kind of neat to see, good for plane spotting and seeing all the takeoffs and landings.
Will you take me there? Wait, what is this? I want to fly to Salt Lake just so you could take me there.
It's
just let you know next time I come back to town.
Quick to the airport.
Yeah, you can see it on the road. If you Google Map it, if you zoom in, there's a road that you can get to. Anybody can get to it, and it just literally takes you from the north side of the airport and splits the runways, and you can see takeoff and landings from every aircraft that goes to and from our airport. So.
Wow.
That's so cool.
I mean, that's amazing that people don't get in trouble. That's what amazes me. Good for you not getting caught.
Well, yeah, it was an interesting...
it's public land.
Yeah, it's public land. It's an interesting place to run on. They don't get too many running traffic, I'd say. So most of the people who take those roads are employees of the the airport or some of the delivery services out there. So.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
What about any favorite local eating spots? Places that you like to eat at, lunch, dinner, whenever, I'm sure you've even discovered new places this last year.
Right. So whenever I was on the west side, I've been there so seldomly. Anytime I did a west side run, I always made it a point to kind of eat at a different West Side restaurant. Like what you mentioned, it's like amazing food there. Like, and it's kind of,
everything is good.
It's disheartening that I spent like a decade without, realizing this fact. I feel so bad about that. But yeah, everything is good. Like I love Chunga's Tacos. That's like my favorite taco joint.
I've heard of them and I haven't been there yet. Shame on me.
They have 2 locations. One's on Redwood Road and I think one's on 900 West. And they're delicious. Like Al Pastor tacos are amazing. I love it. And so I like that place. I also like Thule Bakery a lot for Yeah, just like baked goods and coffee and things like that. And going back, like, again, every run, like, you can kind of come across these places. I ate at an amazing Korean place called Stun Cube down in South Salt Lake. It's like 2700 South and State Street. Amazing Korean, just like in this, like, little mini mall kind of area there. So, I don't know. It's like fun to explore, also culinary, not just the streets too. So.
Yeah, and that has to be cool because when you're running, you can actually get easily to more accessible restaurants.
For sure, yeah.
Than if you're in a car.
Oh, but okay, look, I don't mean to completely sidetrack here, but back to your running. So when you were running, did you have like a notebook with you? And like, how did you get a mile must have taken forever, like especially because you're documenting. You got to read have to write down. Oh man, I want to come back here and eat. I want to come here and eat. I want to come here and eat.
I would stay on one block for like 24 hours. Like, wow, that's so cool.
That's funny. Like mostly I just like remember it in my head. Like,
okay,
it's a funny story. I actually don't really take anything with me on my runs. I don't listen to music or take my phone or anything. I just leave it in my car until my second daughter was about to be born, and my wife was saying, you need to take your phone in case if I go into labor. And so I was like, that's understandable. And so then I started, so I started to take my phone on me. And then now I just like, it's been handy for me whenever I do the Instagram posts. Like I just kind of pause for a few seconds and take a quick snapshot and then go on my way again. So.
Okay. And I have to derail a second because you don't listen to music while you're running.
No.
How are you not feeling? Is it just like, do you get into a meditative state? How do you feel? I mean, if I was just running in silence, I'd probably go crazy. Probably.
I'd say meditative state is a good way to look at it. Like, it's like anything, like the first 5 minutes, you kind of get into the zone a little bit. But once you're in the zone, I just kind of you
just ride the runner's high?
Yeah, a little bit, I would say. A little bit of that. And
I've
just
heard of it. Yeah. I think it's a myth, but I've heard it's a thing. I don't know.
It's definitely a thing. I'm not, I don't run anymore. And I never really was a runner, but when I did run a little bit, I definitely felt like what those positive effects were.
No, for sure. And it's just like, I don't know, maybe it's like finding the flow. Maybe that's like a better idea, because you just kind of go into a groove and your brain kind of goes on autopilot. And that's, I mean, for me, it's like,
it's really amazing.
Oh, thank you. Like it's like a good reprieve.
Yeah. None of us really take the time to just do that anymore. And I think it's something that most of us are afraid to do. Like we're afraid to put down our phones or not have something talking at us, or, you know what I mean? People are afraid to be alone and quote unquote bored.
Yeah, for sure.
But
yeah.
It leads to the best discoveries, as we've seen with you.
And you're just a lot more observant. Like if I just imagine if I was listening to stuff, it's easy to get lost into the music and then you just kind of like look at your feet in front of you on the pavement, and that's about it. But here, without having any sort of distractions, you can kind of wander your head around and look left, look right, and just notice some of these things that you otherwise wouldn't notice.
I like that. It's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I have to, when I'm at the gym or out and about, I got to listen to a podcast or a book or something, because I got to get lost in that, man. Because otherwise I'm focusing way too much on what I'm doing.
When I used to weightlift, I would listen to comedy, but then one time I was listening to Mike Birbiglia while I was doing squats, and I laughed so hard that I couldn't squat back up. So I'm like, okay, comedy, not great while you're moving. Music's probably better. Okay, derailed.
No, you're fine. Dude, that's what I love about podcasts. I mean, it's the same thing with even getting to know somebody like yourself, man, it's why I love podcasts. They're just obscure, man, that way. But back to Salt Lake City, is there anything you would change about Salt Lake City if you had that opportunity? Like, let's say you had the opportunity to change something.
Yeah. One of the things that I did notice as well is like this discrepancy in like trees on the east-west side. And I know like Mayor Mendenhall has this like initiative to, plant 1,000 trees for every year that she's in office, primarily on the west side. And, being up in the East Bench and you look across the valley, everything looks forested and you're like, this isn't a problem. But then like whenever I'm actually out on the roads in, maybe the Glendale area and I go a quarter of the mile, sometimes a third of a mile without seeing a tree on the curb strip, where it's shocking a little bit. And then whereas, Harvard Yale area, you can't even go, 20 yards without having, full grown tree over there. So it's just like, I definitely think more greenery on the west side. And again, going back to the point with these ultra wide roads, I feel like you could have green medians easily. It's something that they've implemented on the east side, like 1100 East going up to the university. They added green medians, and I think that would be very fitting down on the west side on some of these ultra wide roads for sure.
Dude, I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
That's a good. I don't think I've ever had anybody.
Oh, let's do. Okay, all right.
No, that's a good idea. I like that. And that's what I even hope. That's one thing I always hoped with even this podcast is to open up more discussions of possibilities for Utah and for Salt Lake City. And especially as we've shifted so much over the last 10 years. I mean, Salt Lake City has changed so much. I don't know. I mean, now we didn't even find out. Are you from Salt Lake even? Or were you born and raised here?
From
you
Texas.
said a decade.
Right.
That's right. That's right. You good catch there.
Thank you.
I'm from Texas originally, and then I kind of took a circuitous route and ultimately landed here about 10, 11 years ago. And I didn't know anything about Utah before I kind of came in. And whenever I drove in, I was just overwhelmed with like how close the mountains were and just all the different recreational activities you had up in the mountains. It's just it's very good selling point for the state, and I decided to, make my home here, and I don't have zero plans of leaving because I love it so much.
So you've seen it change a lot in the last 10, 11 years then, and then especially running every street, you're like, wow, where did that come from? Where did that come from? I mean, I tell Chrissy all the time, every time we go down to Utah County, I'm like, man, I remember when I-15 was 2 lanes.
Oh my gosh, we are those old people, you guys. We're like, you remember when your parents would be like, that wasn't there when we lived here? And I'm like, oh, you're old. Yeah. We're those people now. I love it.
The scale of developments is just crazy. Like, you just really see it in all neighborhoods too. Like, there's nary a lot that's open anymore. It's like everything's been either raised and in process of getting developed or have been developed. So the city has changed dramatically for sure.
How can listeners get a hold of you? What's your Instagram again, Bryant, for people if they want to reach out to you or if they want to see some of these places you've run? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, sure. So the Instagram account is just at SLCs, and that's spelled SLSEES. Sorry to make it so difficult.
No, it's awesome. It's memorable. Never apologize.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I just basically share a daily post, primarily through things I see on my running. I have a handful of other running projects that I'm either just completed or in work, like to kind of celebrate the Jazz playoff run. I just finished up running 68 laps around Vivint Arena because that's how many wins they need to win the championship. And so a week ago Friday, I just started. I usually almost always post my stuff on Reddit because people seem to enjoy it on that forum site. And I just said, okay, in 1 hour's time, I'm going to run 68 laps around the Jazz Arena. If you're in town, come honk your horn or run a few laps with me. And some people joined me and some shouts of Go Jazz. And it made for a fun morning and early afternoon. It was about 34 miles in total because, so I finished that up.
A long marathon.
Yeah, long marathon, but it's for the Jazz because I really think that we're going to win this year. I'm a strong Jazz fan. I have a couple of other Jazz-related running projects planned and stored for their playoff run as well.
Do they know that you're doing this for them? You're building them up so that they will succeed because they don't even know how much you're giving them here.
I can't imagine.
You could be the mascot.
I can't imagine they do, but I mean, I did think it would be kind of cool if the Jazz Bear came and, ran the last lap with me or something like that. But
oh my gosh,
who knows?
that'd be so cool.
Maybe when they make the finals and then I have, one large, hoopla of a run or something, maybe I can get some promotion. I don't know, but it doesn't really bother me. It's mostly meant for the fans. And then the other project I had that I'm kind of in process is I liked how running all these streets was great for urban exploration. But I looked at the same kind of map of Utah and realized I haven't been to a national park, for example, which I feel like is just a derelict of duty being here for 10 years. And so I was like, how can I change this in the same way? So I decided to basically run the streets of a small town in each of the 29 counties in Utah. So I get to kind of like drive out to some of these remote places and see some beautiful sights along the way. And then, park it in Wallsburg, the city of Wallsburg up in Wasatch County, and just, loop around their, 6 to 10 miles of road, and then, get to see the area a little bit. So I'm about a fifth of the way done with the 29 counties, and the governor seemed to like it because I did his hometown of Fairview as kind of like the first run, and so he kind of appreciated that. So I don't know, it's just fun to explore, and it's a different way to explore the state as well. So
what about that town of Thistle? When you probably went through Thistle when you went out to Fairview, remember that? Fairview, I don't know if you followed that town that flooded and on the way to there, but that is so cool. I just hear random
names and I'm like, oh, there's a town. Like there's always a town that I didn't know about here. It's so crazy.
I was going to say, the funny thing about all these rural towns is like, you think of them as small towns, in population 600, 800. But then when you run the streets, they always wind up being like 18 miles of streets or something unbelievably large. Like it's always shocking to me. Like even small towns, are not that small. Exactly. Yeah.
They're just smarter. They spread out further from their neighbors, right? They're not like, they don't want to be on top of each other, right? Like
that's right.
Like we do. We do here in
20-acre lawns,
Dude, you are the perfect guest for I Am Salt Lake. Like I said, I'm pretty sure I said that in the beginning, because it's just so fascinating, because you are like really the person out there exploring the city, getting to know what's in our backyard, because again, so often we only keep up what's on Facebook. Oh, what's going on Facebook? What's being said on Facebook? And it's
and when you live somewhere, you take for granted the amazing things that are there, so you never go to find them.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on for sure. And it's just like I have this like weird encyclopedic knowledge about the city, and it's just like this has been a great avenue to kind of like unload a little bit of it from my head here. So.
Anything before we completely wrap up here? Chrissy asks a final question. Everybody that comes on here, Bryant, but is there, before we wrap it up, is there anything you were hoping we would talk about? Why the record button's still going and everything here?
No, I think like the big thing, and I don't know if I stress this enough, is like I kind of mentioned this in the Salt Lake Tribune article, but one of the big takeaways was just like how fun it was to go through all these neighborhoods, and you kind of think of it as we're all different. Like I live in Sugar House, or I live in, like, we're these distinct, entities. But then like running through it, you just see how like similar everything is and everyone is. Like running around and seeing all the holidays change. Like for Christmas, everywhere has decorations up. You go around for Halloween, everyone has, jack-o'-lanterns that are on their porch. It doesn't matter if you're in, the East Bench or up out at West Point or down near the Brickyard. Like there's a lot more similarities that I think would be beneficial for people to think about. Like we're all mostly the same. Everyone has kids running through sprinklers. Everyone has like dogs barking at the postman. Despite what our seemingly differences based on geography, we're basically all the same.
Totally. That's like, if we can eliminate any us versus them mentality from all humanity, that would be incredible.
Yeah. So that would be one point that, I wish.
I love it. Take it away, Chrissy. You got the final word here.
I feel like we've gathered much insight already from you, but I'm going to squeeze a little bit more. If you could leave our listeners with a piece of life advice or a motto that you live by, what would you tell them?
I get like a lot of comments from people like saying, "Oh, I can never imagine doing something like this," or I can't even run a mile, or things like that. It's like, and I wish I could tell them that you don't start out as an expert. And I'm sure this is like something that you guys can attest to, doing this weekly pod for almost 500 episodes. Like, it always starts off rough, and that's the most challenging point.
You're always embarrassed the whole time.
Always. And it's the most challenging part. But if you can like work through it and just like have that consistency and dedication to like a goal, like you will improve, like you will get better. And that's really the biggest takeaway, is just how powerful like incremental progress is. Like, I mean, and I could see it in real time with my map. After each run, I just add a little bit more. The next run, a little bit more. Next run, a little bit more. And then by the time you're done with it, a year later, after 118 runs, and you see the whole map that's complete, and you can just take a step back and just realize, hey, this is a huge, huge achievement, but it all started because of all these small steps that you took. So
I love that.
I love it.
You know what else I'd randomly love to see? Because I was thinking of those maps. I want you to have like a wall in your house with a huge map and have like the crazy man red lines all over the place. Just map them out so you can be like, all right, everybody come look at my map.
This lady wouldn't let me drink out of her hose. This dog wouldn't. Hey, wouldn't that be a cool app for runners, is to like tell you what hoses would be okay for you to take a little sip of water from? Wouldn't that be a good idea for a little running app? Anyway, thank you so much, Bryant, for recording with us, buddy. And best of luck with everything. I'd love to catch up with you in like a year or two, see what new crazy things you're up to. So.
Absolutely. Well, maybe, when the Jazz win it all, maybe I'll be running the parade route. Who knows?
Thanks again to Bryant Heath for joining us on this episode of the podcast. All of the links that we mentioned in this conversation can be found with episode show notes on our podcast website, which is at iamsaltlake.com/486, and that is for episode 486.
Hey, it's the first episode of the month, and that means we talk about our Patreon supporters. Those of you that kick on over a couple of bucks, you're kind of like our producers, our assistant producers of the podcast. So thank you, everybody.
True that.
That's a Patreon supporter. Go to patreon.com/iamsaltlake if you want to find out more. But let's go down the list here and give thank you to Jeremy Hunt, Jen Seals, Mark Copeland, Nick Naylor, Brett A. Schmidt, Todd Bjorkland, Tim Horan, Michelle Stevens-Williams, Christopher A. Heiser, Brandon Hill from over at Mountain Standard Time Marketing, Jay Chambers, Sana, John Miller, Eric Tomorrow, Nicole Davison, Nikki Line from over in New Zealand, and Ryan Prince. Thank you, everybody, for being a Patreon supporter. Again, patreon.com/iamsaltlake, and that's going to give you more information about that. You guys have a great week. Get out and enjoy the city. It's going to be a beautiful week, and we're going to see you next week on the next episode of I Am Salt Lake Podcast.
And good night, Grammy.